Hello class, it's Mrs. Hewer, and today we're going to be talking about how to do a landscape drawing in Google Drawings. So I have mine open right here and we're going to get started. The first step is, of course, to right click, and then you're going to click background, and then you're going to choose a really light tint. So the first thing you want to do is choose what color family you want. If you want a primary, secondary, warm, cool. I'm going to go with a very cool colored landscape. So the cool colors are, of course, purple, blue, and green. So for that, I'm going to start with doing lots of purples in my mountains. I'm going to do a mountainous landscape. You could do a desert landscape. You could do a snow landscape, but I'm going to do mountains. So I'm going to do purples for my mountains, kind of green for my foreground, and I'm going to do blues for my sky. So I'm going to start with a blue tint, but that's not light enough for me. So I'm going to right click, click background again, and I'm going to go down here to custom. I'm actually going to pull that up a little bit to make it even lighter. The next tool we're going to use quite a bit is over here under the line tool. You can see it right here, and I'm going to go down and I can choose one of two. If you want everything to be really smooth, you can use what's called the curve tool. To use the curve tool, I just click and drag. And I want to go off the edges on both sides, and that will make it slightly darker. And here I want to get rid of my border color and make that transparent. There I have my first bit of background. Then I'd go to my curve tool. I'd add a slightly darker tint. Get rid of my border color by clicking that little pencil. I'm going to add a little bit more interest to my next layer of mountains. I'm going to go a little darker with this one, but you'll notice I have some gaps here. I don't want those. If I double click, these purple dots show up. These are called handles. I'm just going to click and drag these handles to alter my shapes. Now, these are all looking maybe a little too smooth for my tastes. So maybe instead of using the curve tool, what I instead want to use is, in fact, the polyline tool. What's nice about the polyline tool is it is a little bit easier to control. It makes nice straight lines. So I can make really sharp mountains. Again, I want to get rid of that outline. Make that one a little bit darker. And make that one a little bit darker. And remember what that's called. That's called atmospheric perspective, where it gets lighter and softer as it goes further back in space. But I actually think that I want to go with my purples here. And I might even go a little lighter. So I just click that custom color. Now I have my blues, my purples, and I think I'm going to go now into my green. So I have my horizon, where the sky meets the ground. On my background, I have my middle ground. Now I need to start working more on my foreground. So maybe I want this to be water, but water is a little bit curvier. So I'm going to use my curve tool for this part. Maybe this is my shoreline here. remember if something's not quite what I want, I can always double click and change the handles. Or just delete it and try drawing it again. And then maybe I'll use my polyline tool. Maybe I can make some grass here in the foreground. And maybe I can make like a little island jutting out for part of my middle ground and my details. Maybe having another little island, but I can make whatever I want for my landscape. I can even look at photos of a landscape if that helps. Maybe I can even add like a little bit of an island over here. And you can always move things if they're not quite right. So I have my background, my middle ground, my foreground, but maybe I want to add some really dark, crisp shadows or maybe some extra details. Maybe I even want to make these a silhouette in the foreground, really dark. Another last little fancy thing we can do is add some silhouette using what's called a .png. So if I search, I can look up maybe some trees.png. Oh, and here's a really nice tree silhouette. And what's fancy about a .png, like we used before with our Giuseppe Arcimboldo piece, is they have that transparent background. But for this one, we don't just want any kind of .png, we want a silhouette. And the reason we want a silhouette is because we want to be able to have it be the same color as everything else. So I want to make this look like it's black, the same color as the rest of my image. So that way it'll blend in and look like it belongs there. I think I'm going to make it a little skinnier. Put it right there. Maybe I'll make them a little bit shorter so it's like two little trees, two little friends. And then maybe I'll add him here. And maybe I'll make this black instead of that dark green. Although I do like that dark green kind of popping out behind. So maybe what I need to do on that last tree is draw my own tree and not be lazy. And again, I can always adjust and change and tweak to make that tree look a little bit more how I want for my tree. Maybe I can even add like a little whale kind of coming out of the water. So I can put like the back of the whale and then his tail coming out of the water and his back fin coming out of the water, like so. Just to give a little bit more interest. Now you might say, well, what about all these things that are kind of coming off on the edge? If you were to print this, that's not going to print. You can push Control P and kind of preview how it would print. And you can see that none of that is going to print. It's just going to be your beautiful image in the end. Now the last step is for me to label all of my pieces. So I'm just going to go to Insert and then Word Art. And I'm going to put first my background. And I'm going to shrink that down and I'm going to put it off to the side because I don't want that to print. It's just so that I know that you know where your background is. So I have my background. The next part is my middle ground. And finally, my foreground. And of course, I want you to also know where your horizon line is. Where does that sky meet the ground, or where does the sea meet the land? So you can put your horizon line where you think it is. So my horizon line is kind of in two places. You could argue that maybe this is the horizon line, but it's pretty soft. I'd say my horizon line is actually right here. And there you have it, a beautiful landscape. And remember, you could do a warm landscape, maybe a desert landscape. You could do a sea landscape with icebergs. You could do all sorts of different landscapes. But remember that atmospheric perspective, having a clear color family. Of course, I used cool. You could use monochromatic again and have all the tints, tones, and shades of just one color. You could do primary, you could do secondary, you could do warm, you could do cool, you could do complementary. You could also do analogous, like blue, yellow, and green are all analogous colors, colors next to each other on the color wheel. I want you to choose a color family, build your fantasy landscape, and feel free to add a couple little special details like trees or little animals kind of peeking out. Have fun, and I can't wait to see what you create.